The Arizona Cardinals went from a team favored to go to the Super Bowl to a team that didn't even make the playoffs in 2016. And while watching All or Nothing, a season with the Arizona Cardinals on NFL Network, we get to see some of their flaws that they had in their 2015 season that led to their demise in 2016. And when I look at this, I think it's Bruce Arians' personality. Now, Bruce Arians is a very angry intellectual guy, and he definitely seemed like a very good coach in 2015. I think a lot of people would say he was the second best coach in the NFL. And when you look at Bruce Arians, he definitely had a high resume, and a lot of people had a very high thoughts on him. But I think when it comes to Bruce Arians in his locker room, I see kind of a disconnect here. And when I look at the Arizona Cardinals locker room, it's a very honest locker room. They are not afraid to express their opinions. For instance, Tyrann Mathieu and Colin Kaepernick, how he said he would rather face Blaine, or he said facing Blaine Gabbert was a lot harder than facing Colin Kaepernick, and how Carson Palmer said that he thought Tom Brady was guilty for during the Deflategate and he absolutely deserved the suspension. So it's a very honest locker room that likes to share their opinions. And so is Bruce Arians when he likes to talk about Thursday Night Football. He obviously does not like Thursday Night Football, but he's sick of whining about it. And that's something I definitely did like or getting a takeaway from this series and what I learned about the Arizona Cardinals. But when I look at this, Bruce Arians gets very angry and gets very annoyed at his team a lot of times. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Because when you look at the defense understands it. Tyrann Mathieu plays with a chip on his shoulder. He went from a player being kicked out of his college football program, being an absolutely great safety at LSU, and then making a comeback. So he plays with an absolute edge. And they do bring it up in the series, in the Bruce Arians football life, with how Tyrann Mathieu, that's what he likes about Bruce Arians. He can relate to him because this is a guy that had to redeem himself and whatnot. But then when you look at the offense, I look at Carson Palmer, a first overall pick who really seems to choke a lot. And yes, I get it. He had a lot of game-winning drives in 2015, but please, come on. Peyton Manning had tons of game-winning drives, yet he's known for being a choke artist. Same with Matt Ryan, and trust me, don't get me started on Matt Ryan. And when I look at this Cardinals team, I think offensively, I think the team for the most part is soft, and he doesn't really have a lot of guys who can really play for the big moment. The only guy I would really say that can play for the big moment is Larry Fitzgerald. And in my opinion, Larry Fitzgerald is like the third best receiver in the league. I think that guy is very classy, and he's also sneaky tough. And a lot of people forget that he actually scored very late in the Super Bowl against the Steelers, but obviously the Steelers drove down the field with them. And when I look at this, I just feel when Carson Palmer, if he can't play in the clutch moment, I think that means you lack confidence. I've read somewhere on the internet that basically psychology-wise, that people that tend to like choke or get nervous, so-called, they are the times that don't really have a lot of confidence. And so when Bruce Arians just constantly gets mad at Carson Palmer, I don't think that really helps him that much. I think Carson Palmer really needs a coach similar to Pete Carroll or even a Mike Tomlin. I'm not even high on Mike Tomlin, but I know that will be a good fix. I know those guys are motivational. Bruce Arians isn't exactly motivational. And when they were prepping for their primetime game against the Cincinnati Bengals, he was talking about how the Bengals were the best team that they're going to face all year and all that. I feel like defensively, if you're telling that to Tyrann Mathieu would understand know how to respond to that. While Carson Palmer would think on top of his head, like, oh no, I'm facing my former team, the Bengals. And I'm just looking at this, and you see early on in the game, he threw two awful interceptions. They weren't even lucky interceptions. They were just really bad, overthrowing targets and whatnot. And you just see him mentally, he just could not get it. And yes, he did drive down the field and put them in field goal range, but there was times where he was screwing up the kneel down. And the only reason why they got back into range or they got lucky at the end because when the Bengals players on the defensive line jumped off sides. When you look at the Cincinnati Bengals, sometimes they just do a lot of stupid stuff, especially their defense is a lot of dumb stuff, and they just got lucky there. So Carson Palmer doesn't really play in a clutch moment. It explains why, since he's been in 2003, he has won one playoff game. And when I look at him, his other coaches that he had was Dennis Allis, who was complete crap on the Oakland Raiders. And then he had Marvin Lewis, who we're just surprised that he still has a job in the NFL. The Bengals haven't won a playoff game in God knows how many years, like 20, 30? Who knows? it's been too long for the Bengals. But Carson Palmer, the offense just doesn't seem like connect. And when I look at John Brown too, John Brown's definitely a guy that seems like to get soft and whatnot and all that. And when he gets yelled at, he gets all pouty and whatnot. He's kind of like Cam Newton. Like when he's like doing really well, he's so high on himself. But then when something bad happens, you see him, he gets so low on himself. Like you saw him on the bench just slouching down, putting his head down. Like he was just so depressed. And Carson Palmer had to come over and help him out. And I just don't think offensively the team doesn't connect very well with Bruce Arians. And then when you look at Michael Floyd, who is going through a contract year in 2016, completely underperforms and decides to get depressed about and drink alcohol. I look at Bruce Arians. Bruce Arians is the kind of guy that should help him out in that situation, or a guy that should basically lift him up or like not get him so down about it. But that's just how it works. And I just look at this. Ideally, I know Bruce Arians doesn't get to pick his own players and whatnot, but at the same time, though, he doesn't connect to the locker room. And I think he's just too stubborn to change him. And if you look at him in 2015, he was an excellent play caller. Now in 2016, even his play calling went down. So how can you have really respect for this guy? So I wouldn't be surprised if there's some turmoil with Arizona because they are known for being a very honest locker room. Now, when I look at Bruce Arians, they're hyping up his resume as a coach. And I'm just thinking to myself, it took him forever to get hired. Yes, I get it that he didn't advertise himself that much, but still, even if you don't advertise yourself, you still will probably find a head coaching job somewhere. And eventually he did, and I do feel like it is deserving. But at the same time, though, when they're trying to advertise how good of a quarterback coach he is, the three quarterbacks that he coached were Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, and Andrew Luck. Now, you look at those are two quarterbacks that are sure Hall of Famer and one quarterback who has a really promising career ahead of him. But when I look at this, Peyton Manning in his draft class was like a surefire, gonna be a great starter, son of an NFL quarterback. Like that guy was destined for greatness. Then you look at Andrew Luck. Andrew Luck was a surefire, like great quarterback coming out of the 2012 draft. A lot of people know that this guy's going to be ready for day one. They thought this guy was going to be professional. He's going to work really out well. So Bruce Arians definitely had himself handed it. But when it comes to Ben Roethlisberger, I do get it that he definitely did morph that guy into a good quarterback. But the Steelers eventually fired him because he couldn't protect Ben Roethlisberger at all. And I look at that, Bruce Arians is just way too stubborn to play in the game. And this is just something with the 2000s. Bruce Arians is not the only coach. There's so many stubborn coaches in the NFL in the 2000s. It's absolutely ridiculous. They just keep on doing their own thing. They don't adjust to the situation. The only coach that adjusts to the situation is Bill Belichick, and he is the only Hall of Fame head coach that is still coaching right now. The 2000s coaches have been absolute crap and have been disappointing. In the 80s, you had Bill Walsh, Tom Landry, Don Shula, Marty Schottenheimer, Joe Gibbs, Bill Parcells, Mike Ditka. The list goes on. They had great coaches in the 80s. In the 2000s, I can name two Hall of Fame head coaches, Bill Belichick and Tony Dungy. And then who's the third guy? Marvin Lewis? Jeff Fisher? Are you kidding me? No. And I look at Bruce Arians, he just follows the same trend. Just some sort of guy who has some fun play calls here and there, knows and had some success, but now he's not doing anything. And I know he's going to be stubborn. I know he isn't the GM of the team. He can't really pick his players, but there's a certain degree where you need to adjust. When I look at Tom Coughlin, even Tom Coughlin himself had to adjust, yet he really didn't have that many playoff spurts with the New York Giants. Yes, he did win 2 Super Bowls, but he could not consistently make it into the playoffs year in, year out. It had to be the perfect situation. And I think these coaches are just way too high maintenance. I understand about being strict with your management and whatnot, but at the same time, though, stop being so stubborn. Do adjust to your players. I don't think Bruce Arians is that guy. And there's some things I like about Bruce Arians, and there's some things I can talk myself into with Bruce Arians. But for a guy that had this team that was Super Bowl contenders, and them just to go downhill from that, it's just absolutely mind-boggling why that happened. But overall, when watching the series, NFL Network does a great job with their documentaries, and I think All or Nothing is just another great documentary. I kind of make fun of it a lot just because I find it cheesy because the Arizona Cardinals were hyped up to be this great team and now they just kind of suck. And it's just kind of funny to think of what happened to them. But overall, when I look at the Arizona Cardinals, they're a great team. They have a lot of talent though, but there's definitely a disconnect between the head coach and his players. And when I look at this, It might not be super visible right now, but overall, I don't think the Arizona Cardinals will make the playoffs in 2017.